watching The Hub. I'm Lise Doucette. The headlines this hour. Anti-government protests are taking place again across Syria after Friday prayers. Security forces reportedly opened fire on protesters in some areas. And European markets have moved upwards after a 2-week ban on short selling is imposed in 4 European countries. Let's return to our top story this hour. Protests against President Assad were held in many parts of Syria today after Friday prayers. Security forces again reportedly opened fire in some areas, killing at least 10 people. Some reports put that figure higher, and there are reports that more than 2,000 people have been killed over the past 5 months. Well, in Washington, there's a hardening of the line, but not still a firm call for President Assad to step down. Let's just get some insight into the American position. We're joined now via webcam from Nantucket Island off the coast of Massachusetts by Ambassador Richard Murphy, a former U.S. ambassador to Syria. Welcome, Richard Murphy. I'm sure you've been watching carefully the language, the different words being used coming out of the State Department and the White House. How do you see Washington's perspective on this crisis now?
Well, it sees its voice and the voice of other outsiders to Syria as important to the morale of those critics of the regime who have been ready to lay down their lives, a number somewhat over 2,000 apparently as of this moment.
Well, we heard from our Middle East correspondent describing it as Washington is tiptoeing around the issue. Sometimes it's called on President Assad to reform. This week, though, it seems to be taking a tougher line, saying he's lost all legitimacy.
Well, the call to reform is still there, but the hope that he is going to reform is certainly diminishing. His answer appears to be a resort to violence, which served his father well in the early 80s and has been a consistent policy of suppressing critics of the regime, whether through imprisonment or strong warnings over the years. And that has been accompanied by promises of reform which have not been judged credible by the Syrian critics.
The way you see Syria, and you've watched the country up close for many years, do you think President Assad is going to be able to keep holding on by sheer use of force, as you've just explained?
I think he can hold on certainly for a period. The opposition remains united on only one demand, which is that he leave power, but does not have, as yet, does not appear to have a sense of unity and a consistent program to replace him, which has been a factor holding back further criticism of the president from, for instance, the business communities of Damascus and Aleppo.
Now, we've seen in countries like Tunisia and Egypt, it was the military and the military at high levels, their decisions that played the key role in the uprisings and revolutions there. It's a lot more complex, it seems, in Damascus.
There's no evidence of a crack in the ranks of the senior military, questioning of the regime's ability and right to continue in power. They see their interests very much wedded to the regime, and the sort of disagreements that were quickly apparent between the regime in Tunisia and in Egypt simply has not appeared in Syria as yet.
And so it begs the question then, is how then would any transition happen, if that's the right word to use? Well,
I think that the Secretary of State's efforts in encouraging Europe to join in strict sanctions against Syria's oil and energy sector, stop importing from Syria, encouraging China, India, if they're ready to move, to join in that effort, because that would be a telling blow to the business community in Syria that would realize the consequences. This is a very important sector for Syria's own national economy.
Ambassador Richard Murphy, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us from Nantucket on webcam. It's always a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.
There's been a spate of deaths in South Korea's military this year. 4 people were killed after a shooting in a frontline Marine unit. There's also been several apparent suicides. The incidents raise questions about the culture inside the barracks of the armed forces. Lucy Williamson looks now at how demands for a tougher military force are being met with calls for reform.
In South Korea, becoming a man means becoming a soldier. At least that's what the army says. Military service is a rite of passage here, but the war games and the train. Since a North Korean attack last year, the nation has called on its military to toughen up.
All this training is to prepare troops to confront external enemies, but the military is also having to confront a threat from within. A barracks culture that some say is helping to kill its soldiers before a real shot has been fired.
Even the elite Marine Corps hasn't escaped untarnished. Last month, a Marine corporal shot and killed 4 of his comrades. He said he was being bullied. Several other soldiers killed themselves in the weeks that followed. Since then, South Korea's defense ministry has brought out new orders, banning beating, cruelty, humiliation and bullying. There's been reform of the military before, but the question of exactly why and how soldiers die in barracks has often remained unanswered. Chae Il-byung and Pak Un-hee lost their youngest son 10 years ago. Despite several investigations, they still don't know how he died. If the nation calls upon our sons, it has a duty to return them safe and sound, he tells me. But for us to be left like this, not knowing the cause of my son's death, I think that's a great betrayal of a citizen and a parent. Calls to military counselling services have multiplied since the latest spate of deaths. Investigators say the number of non-combat deaths has actually fallen dramatically since the 1980s, from 800 a year to around 100, but that old-fashioned attitudes still remain.
There needs to be a major change in thinking towards soldiers in the first place. They are citizens in uniform, and I think there needs to be better awareness of their basic rights.
The Defence Ministry admits there's a problem, and military commanders say camp culture is changing, slowly.
This barracks culture isn't something that we can change overnight, just for the show of it. It needs to change slowly. I think we need to continue the work we've been doing.
Commanders say the conscripts themselves are different now, more individualistic, less suited to military life than their fathers. But even if they've changed, the threat of war here hasn't. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Seoul.
Now to that much-loved sport, cricket, and cricket fans in India might want to look away now. The Test team were officially recognised, as you may remember, as the world's best back in 2009. It's a distant memory, though, and it might come to an end in the next 2 days. Already, I think it's 2-0 down in the series against England. They look to be heading for a heavy defeat in the 3rd Test at Edgbaston after being outplayed by their hosts. So, brilliant England, poor India, it's a mixture of both. Amelia Harris joins us here. Now, I mean, I've been watching this very closely all day. Is it really that England is playing so well or India is playing so poorly?
Well, it is a combination of the two, but India's performance has been really below par. You've got to think they're one of the top-ranked test teams in the universe. And they're absolutely they're just rolling over. They're hoping for bad light to end play. They're hoping for rain. There was a bit of controversy after lunch when there was a floodlight failure, but the umpire decided to continue with play. But England declared on 710 for 7, with Alistair Cook getting 294, crucially 6 runs short of 300. Yes. Honestly, he did look like he'd lost the winning lottery ticket. And we've got Joe Wilson, who's there for us actually at Edgbaston. Joe, it's an extraordinary turn of events there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you've been discussing between yourselves the historical significance, the historical context of today's play. You know, cricket fans love statistics, but really they stand out today. This was the highest ever total by England in a 5-day test match. The 294 by Alistair Cook was not only his personal best score, it was the highest score by anyone ever on this ground. As for India, who, bear in mind, lost Virender Sehwag to a first ball duck again, as they began their second innings 486 runs behind. Well, I don't know if India have ever had a worse day in Test cricket. Certainly, I can't really remember one.
You wouldn't expect England to record their highest ever Test score against a team like India, would you, Joe?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, we were discussing earlier, weren't we, Amelia, that this whole Test match series was billed as the battle to become world #1. And there is a sense of disappointment, I think, even amongst some England supporters, that it hasn't really lived up to this billing. It stopped being a contest a long time ago. That's a huge disappointment, I think, to many Indian fans who are looking for reasons behind the poor performances here. Perhaps a lack of respect that some Indian teams and the Indian board have shown to such a prestigious series. But yeah, I mean, where do India go from here, apart from a defeat very quickly?
Lovely, wonderful stuff, Dan. Really sorry to cut you short. Exciting things, though, and unfolding at Edgbaston.
Indeed. Big smile on Joe Wilson's face, too. Thanks for joining us, Joe. We'd like to hear what you think, too, cricket or any of the other stories on the Hub.